the question that I've had out there for 2 weeks, and you've had 2 weeks to think about it, so I'm sure we're going to be full of answers, is what's your expectation of the marriage supper of the Lamb? What's your expectation? And listen, please, do not tell me the Bible's version. I'm asking you personally, what's your expectation of the marriage supper of the Lamb? Doors open.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Just because we're there.
Ooh.
I don't know. I think it could be fun.
Church and fun? How?
Oh, yeah. Church can be fun.
Unless I'm part of a youth group, unless I'm a part of some teen trip, unless it's VBS or Awanas, church is not fun. How dare you?
Church should be fun. I think Gene has brought this up several times, that we can have fun in church, and we can have fun. I know I blame it all on Gene right now, but we can have fun in church. Why do we have to be so somber? I mean, nothing need. Okay, so yes, there are some hymns that sound like a dirge. Just gonna say it, but why can't it be fun? Have I gotten kicked out today?
So you're suggesting that the marriage supper of the Lamb, the holy epitome of our relationship with Jesus, that it's supposed to be fun.
Yeah. Shouldn't all our relationships be fun?
How dare you? How dare you use that three-letter word to profane this sacred discussion that we're having? So let me ask a different question.
I want it to be fun.
Let me ask a different question. Do you think the wedding at Cana was fun?
The wedding at Cana. Now you're going to make me think about that for a second.
Sure. Jesus turns water into wine.
Yeah. So I think it might have become fun at the end there when he did turn the water into wine and they were now serving the best.
So you're even becoming even more indignant. You're suggesting that if they weren't having fun, when Jesus actually makes his imprint on the wedding event, it then became fun if it wasn't fun previous to that.
Well, probably because, I mean, because usually at the weddings, yeah, you have that bad stuff, right? Everything's kind of like I think you've already had the best, then you've got the worst later. Is that how it goes, I think? But now they had the best at the end. So it's kind of like they were being more, that's what I'm looking for. Respectful is not the word I want, but it's coming to my brain right now. I think I'm befuddled this morning.
How about appreciative?
Yeah, appreciative. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. But I mean, why can't it be fun? And I mean, of course, you know, I can go back to Gene's things with the Jewish weddings are always celebratory, right? They're probably a lot more celebratory than standard weddings that we've been to.
How dare you create fun with a church event and I'm an adult? How dare you?
Do you want to go to something that's not fun?
Sure. What's not fun? By the way, we're talking about the marriage supper of the Lamb. Marriage supper, not the passing over that gets us ultimately to the marriage supper. So what's not fun about the marriage supper of the Lamb?
What's not fun? Is that what you're asking me?
Sure.
I'm going to pass on that and let me think about that.
Gotcha.
I'll let somebody else talk.
I'm thinking about, because I've been blamed for something already and I'm not sure what. I'm thinking that we talked about a Jewish wedding. All of a sudden I'm thinking of Fiddler on the Roof wedding. They stomp the glass and there is clapping and dancing and singing, and there's a lot of fun there. And if that's a picture of what we might be having an experience for at the marriage supper, that sounds like it could be not just fun, but exhilarating rather than funereal and sleep inducing.
Like parties. That sounds like a party. What Sarah just described and what you just described, by the way, and I would hope people aren't jumping on glass, right? But because sometimes that's not fun. That's actually dangerous and potentially an infection waiting to happen. But having said that, you don't like parties. So why would you look forward to what Sarah alluded to and you just described?
Oh, well, see, you didn't ask what I was looking forward to. You just said
I actually did.
expecting.
I said, what do you think is going to happen, or what do you think is the marriage supper of the Lamb?
And that's what I'm thinking. When we start talking about a Jewish wedding, I'm thinking it might be something like that.
Is that fun for you?
Well, I enjoyed watching that movie. Let me put it that way.
Okay, we need to come back to you because you're not answering the question.
Okay.
Okay, because you're talking about watching a movie. That's not what we're talking about here. Who's next? We're going to come back to you. What's your expectation concerning the marriage supper of the Lamb? Not what do you want to watch when you watch the marriage supper of the Lamb. What's your expectation? Sarah already kicked the door open by saying fun. How dare she? Who else? Gene says, I'd like to watch a movie about the marriage supper of the Lamb where they're jumping and stepping on glass. Who else is next?
I'm going to go somewhere that you and I always don't go. You know, you got to figure that if Jesus is using a phrase like that, and the Bible's using a phrase like that, that there are elements that people that are reading it would understand, right? So, in my mind, if I think about what a banquet at a wedding is like, if it's one that I enjoy, okay, not the hour and a half Catholic wedding, though the wedding I didn't really like, but you know, the prime rib afterwards was pretty amazing. So it's good that Jesus didn't talk about the wedding. He talked about the supper. You know, you just think about it. To me, there's I'm going to be full. You know, that's one thing. And two, and there's a part that we don't go to, Preston, but I mean, honestly, I enjoy seeing people. I enjoy seeing people I care about. I enjoy people that I love, but I also get to meet new people. So in my mind, as much as I say I'd be fine as long as Jesus is there, I think it's going to be crowded, and people are going to be hugging on each other, and you know, kind of crazy. So I kind of feel like you know, celebration and falling all over each other, and you know, you're not going to leave. So that's kind of my thought, because that's what a good wedding supper feels like to me.
You just said the wedding supper, the marriage supper of the Lamb is going to be crazy. How dare you use that 5-letter word to describe the marriage supper of all marriage suppers? Crazy. Huh. Who else?
I had been thinking about this for a couple of weeks. And the thing that kept coming back to me is the fact that it's called the marriage supper of the Lamb, not of Jesus. So what does the Lamb mean? And, you know, just getting a picture of that this week has been pretty humbling, because, you know, Jesus will appear as the Lamb because that was his role all throughout history. He stood between us and God, right? And at this marriage supper, we're going to be like him. And, you know, the Revelation says, blessed is he that is invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Wow. I can't wrap, because it's not the celebration as we as Americans, entitled Americans feel, or selfish Americans feel. It's going to be so much more that I cannot grasp how wonderful it's going to be.
So Diane, I don't think you said this word, but could I throw this out potentially as a blanket? Undeserving. And when I take a look at Bruce's picture and sprinkle a little or a lot of that crazy Sarah's picture on it, and I think about that undeservingness, that's where you begin sometimes to cry uncontrollably, but not because you're sad, but because there's fun and there's unpredictability and there's other people and there's crazy, and you are in the presence of a groom that you don't deserve, yet you get him. Other thoughts?
Here's the other thing, the celebration between God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and the angels, and the saints finally all come together. Finally, the discipline has been done and everybody is back in, where it all began, in Eden. I mean, that's incredible.
So I think you're referencing unity there. So I think if I was going to put a couple of adjectives out there, I've got Sarah again, fun, Bruce with crazy, you with undeserving, and a sense of unity. Anything else? By the way, I appreciate those of you who haven't chimed in, because I guess you spend so much time thinking about eternity. You're just so overwhelmed with potential interjections. Great to know. So let me ask a difficult question, especially for those of us who might be silent. So, are you looking forward to the marriage supper of the Lamb? And guess what? Sometimes maybe the reality of that question or the truth of that question may be one of the things we need to apply to our lives. Are you looking forward to the marriage supper of the Lamb? That's actually a question. You all get to respond to.
I'm wondering whether or not the better question might be, are we? Because now you're assuming we are.
The first question is one where I assume that we are. The question I'm following up with, in some ways, is based on the response or the few responses that we got, because we might not be looking forward to the marriage supper of the Lamb. By the way, if indeed, thanks, Diane, appreciate your chuckle there. If indeed we're not, folks, that's where Diane, who talked with us last Sunday about the work that the Lord needs to do with us, see, that's got to be where the Lord inspires us, because we've got to be locked in there before we're going to go and spread the love of Jesus elsewhere.
I wonder sometimes whether or not the marriage supper of the Lamb and the realization that we are where we had hoped to end up in eternity, and that we're maybe even have heard, well done, good and faithful servant. I wonder sometimes whether or not that's going to be a bittersweet sort of thing, because, for example, I'm not sure we're going to have any more karaoke. Not going to be able to go and listen to a beach concert. Not going to be able to do some of the things that we might have gotten accustomed to here. But at the same time, there's going to be perhaps an elevated level of worship and praise. Bruce mentioned the fact that, Jesus is going to be there. It's going to be crowded. I seriously think, and back to the first question that I tried to answer that nobody seemed to hear, I don't think that we expect it to be, because the description is intended to help us to understand some of the aspects of it, but I don't think it's going to be what we're typically envisioning when we think of the marriage supper of the Lamb. And this goes back to what Bruce said. These are images that would have conjured up something into the reader's mind. But again, I don't think it's going to be exactly what we might expect.
Okay, so let's then drill down a little bit on what you just said. So what are you looking forward to if it has no imprint that's related to our earthly understanding? What are you looking forward to that's the marriage supper of the Lamb?
Rest.
What kind of rest?
Well, it seems to me that there's a faith that is associated with entering into the Lord's rest, the divine rest, the calm, the ability to know that not just what we know now as far as everything's handled, but at the same time, perhaps our faith becomes sight and we see that it's handled, and we're able to just struggle no more.
All right.
Gene, I like what you said. But I'm not willing to die for that. I'm not willing to leave this world for that, honestly. I mean, if that's it, and you didn't say that was it, so I'm not gonna put words in your mouth. But after about a week of that, I'm gonna be bored out of my mind. You know, I go on vacation after about 3 or 4 days. I'm like, let's get something going, man. So I don't think that'll be enough for me, but I kind of related to that. When you say rest, you know, I'm kind of looking forward to the idea that I'm not going to have to deal with all the hubbub, all the stress, all the gar- There's a reason I'm leaving Hawaii. I mean, you know, one of the main reasons we're leaving Hawaii is because, as beautiful as this place is I'm tired of all the silliness, all the sin. I'm tired of all the graft and the corruption and the junk that I'm just dealing with every single day in our news and our culture. I'm just tired of that. I don't want to deal with it. So when you say rest from that, yeah, I'm good with that. I just want to be somewhere where I can laugh from my depths of my heart. I want to be somewhere where I feel joy. And I think that's my thing. That's what I see in the marriage supper is joy. I mean, just your heart's about to beat out of your chest. You're just having so much joy and fun. Sarah's word, right? I think you know, from that, you're going to feel restful. I mean, sometimes when you go to big fun events, you're tired but as my mom used to say, it's a good time, you know?
I appreciate that, Bruce. And I'll point out that we have different personalities. I'm not the alpha dude that's going to go out and say, let's get something happening. My 2 weeks off for the holidays, I was pretty boring to be around. And it's kind of like the line from the Hitman's Bodyguard. Boring is good. I kind of like that, because if you're a bodyguard and things aren't boring, that means there's a lot of stuff to get over and handle. I'm kind of liking that. So the marriage supper, yeah, I think it's gonna be restful. I think it's gonna be fun, but it's gonna be fun for the right people, and it's gonna be joy for the right people, and that's one of the things that I don't know that we get our head around, because that we're talking about an eternal state that is individualized and collective all at the same time. I think God is God, and we're going to all have exactly what we would like to have in that eternal state.
Now, I'm going to go with Diane on that, because that sounded incredibly driven by us and not him. And so I think the connector between what you just said and where it probably is that, and I think Diane said this too, we're going to be changed. So the thing that's going to connect what brings us joy and who God is that we're going to be like him. We'll see him because we'll be like him. So I think that's maybe the connector there. Because I'll be honest with you, if I thought it was going to be what you just described from a human perspective, I'm not going over to that county too often. I'll come visit you, but then I got to get back where I need to be. But I think the difference is you and I are both going to be like Christ. So that'll kind of smooth those wrinkles out pretty well. So.
And that's probably the thing I'm probably looking forward to the most, is being more like him so that I can perhaps engage differently than what I typically do here.
Thank you all that just participated, because you are helping open the door to where our next study is. And there are two keys two words that are probably important to remember as we walk into this next study. Still have to play a little bit with this marriage supper of the Lamb, just a little bit more, but I want you to hear, because you all said this, by the way, this is why we have this kind of exchange. Because I could tell you that you're going to say this, but sometimes when organically it begins to flow, then you have to own it, because I didn't force you to say it. So please recognize this. If you're not experiencing rest now, you may need to go back and revisit transformation, which is what this next lesson is about. If you are not experiencing Jesus's rest now, you may need to go back and experience transformation. When we saw Jesus on earth depicted in these scriptures, other than, and I don't even know that this is boring because we use the word passion, there was very little about Jesus's adult life and ministry that was sleep-inducing, that was boring. Now listen, rest is very important. Transformation is very important. And Jesus makes reference to both of those during the course of his message, that in him, he is our Sabbath. He is our rest. That's partly what it is finished means. Go back to Jeremiah 31:31. The new recognition that Jesus is going to come and his Holy Spirit is going to act directly with us and work on our heart provides not only rest, but transformation. And if we're struggling to experience transformation in this life, we may need to challenge the positions we're in terms of leading people toward Jesus. Here's what I mean by that. If we're not excited about leading people toward Jesus, then it's really a contrived situation to get us revved up to do that. Because we're not thinking about Jesus as fun. We're not thinking about hanging out with Jesus as being crazy. And I don't mean crazy like padded walls crazy. I mean crazy the way that Bruce suggested. And crazy because there are untold people that we know and don't know that are a part of this thing. And on everybody's face, they're welling up with a combination of both happiness, of joy, and tears. And there's food, and there's music, and there's the Lamb, and we're undeserving, and yet not only are we there, we're equal. Don't misunderstand me. We're like God, we're not God. That, I think, at least for me, borrowing some of your advertising and your adjectives, that's what I think the marriage supper of the Lamb is. That's what I'm looking forward to. That's what makes it easy for me to go and tell and talk to people about Jesus, because that sounds like it's not only a good time, it's a curious time, and it's a time that says the unexpected can happen, and it's all not just great, but good. And good the way that Yahweh said in the beginning when creation was good. That is real easy for me to get inspired to go talk to people about because it's not a vacation. And I like what Bruce said. Goodness knows, we travel around often. And I certainly love traveling. But at a certain point in time, you go, okay, ready to go home. That's not what the marriage supper of the Lamb is going to be. We're going to be with him for eternity, and we're going to go, this rocks. This is best. And I appreciate what Brother Gene did, but recognize, folks, this is what we all do, is we try to compartmentalize eternity in the way that we like it best, the way it fits us best. And if Jesus is one size fits all, you can't sometimes limit or marginalize Jesus by going, he fits here, because that's how he works for me. He's going to work for every human being that's ever lived that says, Jesus is my Lord.
Amen.
And that's not a head thing only. It's a dual, it's both and. And when Ellen and I look back at our wedding reception, elements of that were there. Just what Bruce kind of was certainly what that terrible Sarah said. There was fun happening. What Bruce said, there was crazy going on because there were people cross-pollinating that perhaps would never ever be in the same room together. Maybe wouldn't even ever cross paths, but they did because of the bride and the groom. And there was music, and there was dancing, and there was food, and there was alcohol. And there was a big room that was big enough for more people, but it was already filled with a whole lot of people. And when we watched it, the sense was, man, we go back and do that. Man, that was 4 hours, but that didn't even seem all that long. Let me pause there and let you comment.
One other thing that's come to mind as you were talking was a comment that Oswald Chambers says that is huge in my mind. You talked about how the Lord operated here. Sarah was talking about how Nate's flight into Charlotte was a little bit delayed and he had to hurry and scurry to get to the next connection. I don't see where Jesus had that kind of issue in his life. And the words that Chambers uses is, behold the leisure of Jesus. He was so leisurely. And I fly against this personally, I know, because I'm always trying to get things done. I'm task oriented. But I look forward to the time when we can be more leisurely, even now before we get to heaven, get to the eternal state. But I think that's one of the things we might want to think about is, and when he walked down here, he was not in a hurry even a little bit. And I need to get to that place now, because I think that's going to be part of what we'll be experiencing when we get there.
I will say I have hated this question because the more that I study and read about it, I think in all of here that we aren't good enough or all in enough to be included there.
And maybe as we march through some of this, I've got that in my next round of questions, that phrase you just used. So let me ask a tough question, because Diane said this was a tough question. I believe that it is. So let me ask a little battery of questions for you, because this has been weighing interestingly on me the past couple of weeks as we try to take a look at this, as we segue into this next study. By the way, Diane, what was the name of the study that you did back in the spring about hurry? The agenda one. list.
Sorry, my old mind cannot think of it. Any of you ladies help me?
Ruthless elimination of hurry. She did a study called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Gene, that speaks exactly into what it is you talked about in terms of experiencing leisure now. And the funny thing about that is it has actually right now instructions as to do this in order to better experience Jesus's rest. In order to have that leisure approach to life that you just said you admired in Jesus, this book says, try this, do this, put away this. Now, there's a book with 66 chapters that kind of does the same thing, but sometimes we don't heed that better. When we get Oprah's self-help book, that's the one that better speaks to us. But I know that some of that has helped my wife because she took from that, okay, and I mentioned this before, she doesn't make lists. My wife is a big list person. She doesn't make lists the same way anymore. What she said is, I'm going to make a list only for work, but I'm not going to make a list for my life. Because when I make a list for my life, then I limit Jesus's ability to impact the world through me. Okay? And through her immersion in that study, that's also helped to affect me to go, okay, so we can and we need to adopt a kind of more leisurely, and I don't mean like laying on the beach, but a leisurely approach toward life. And that leisurely approach is the open hand given. Is our hands are open so that we can give what the Lord needs and the Lord can put into our lives what it is that he needs to put in. And there's a peace about that in this lifetime. So you kind of make reference to this, Gene. So let me ask this question. And Diane, you said the phrase. So how about this question? Why should you attend the marriage supper of the Lamb if you're not all in? Why should you attend the marriage supper of the Lamb if you're not all in?
It seems to me, and this is just me, we use a couple of different terms interchangeably. All in. Years ago, the sold out. There was a sense in which it was like fully surrendered. There's a whole bunch of different terms that are used for that. And it seems to me that if you aren't one of those terms or the concept that's conveyed there, you're probably not going to be interested.
Okay, so let me try this again. Why should you attend if you're not all in? So you gave me the Sunday school answer there, Gene. You gave me the if one does not. I'm asking us individually. If you're not all in.
What if I am?
Pardon?
What if I am?
Right. I didn't. That's what I asked before. So now I'm asking the opposite of that. Why should you attend if you're not all in?
Then I have an answer for that because I am.
Well, but I know where you're heading on this, I think. And I'm kind of hearing two things, and I'm kind of thinking two things. One, all in means all in. I mean, there's all in as in I've got the key card and I've got the internet access to the company intranet. And then there's all in as in I'm actually doing the job that I was hired to do. Right? So I guess maybe the question is there a kiddie table at the marriage supper of the Lamb?
Kiddie table.
Love it.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, I've got still a foot in this world as I struggle to serve Jesus and his kiddie table.
So listen, I think Gene took this question the wrong way. I didn't say that you're not attending the marriage supper of the Lamb. That's not what I asked. I asked, why should you attend? Because what Bruce just said and what Diane kind of scoffed at is kind of the imagery that in some ways exists in my head as well. Is you guys understand the kiddie table versus where the adults sit at any celebration, right? Somebody help throw out some words there so I know you're all kind of jousting with me.
Well, the kiddie table has like the children conversations happening, right? And you're kind of away from the big group, but you're having your own interactions that are more your level. So that's the kiddie table in my mind. That's the kiddie table in my mind, right? Although sometimes the kid table can have a lot more lively conversation than the adult table. Let me just put it to you that way too. Because kids have different perspectives on things. So yeah, but that's my perspective of the kiddie table.
When you're invited to an event with prestige, you don't, even though we talk about the kiddie table during our holidays, you don't want to be relegated to sitting at the kiddie table at an event where there's prestige. Indeed, what Sarah just described, what Bruce brought up, the kiddie table can have a lot of fun. Ellen and I can tell you stories about the kiddie table ad infinitum. But you want to sit at the wedding banquet table.
Yeah, you don't want to be restricted to just having to eat chicken nuggets and macaroni and cheese and bologna. You want to be able to get the prime rib and the escargot if you like that, and that kind of thing, right?
Right, not the Kool-Aid, because that's what you get. You get the Kool-Aid and the Coke. So I don't know anyone that gets excited about inviting people to an event to sit at the kiddie table, to sit at the also ran table, to sit at the I don't really want to be here table. I'm here because I've been brought here table. That's actually kind of the kiddie table as well. So, sure, let me ask this next one since we're on this, because you guys are so loquacious this morning. Let's just jump to the next one. So, is it okay for the groom to be all in, not the bride?
Don't both parties have to be all in for a wedding? Am I just missing something?
I'm still hung up with liking to be at the kiddie table so I can watch Preston manipulate and mess with the kids the way he typically does. That's just one other thing I was thinking. But yeah, it's kind of like uh, a Mr. Miyagiism. Yeah, will you marry me? Okay, I guess. That's not all in. That there needs to be a definite yes kind of thing. We have to get to the place where the groom is obviously all in. The bride has got to be, otherwise the relationship is not going to happen the way it's supposed to.
So you certain about what you just said? Or you just, is that like, did you read that someplace? Are you certain about what you just said?
Well, now see, this is the Miyagiism. If you talk about, I guess I'm ready, then he describes as being okay, walk on the side, one side of the road, good. Other side of the road, good. Try to walk down the middle, which is the I guess so, you're going to get squashed. We need to be definitely certain, and I am.
All right, and so you're saying it's a bad thing if the groom and the bride are not all in together.
I agree.
Okay.
They both have to be.
But okay. Don't you tend to grow in that relationship too, even after you're married? Because, I mean, if I look back at Steve and I 30 years ago and where we are now, we're the same, but we're very different as well. But we've grown together, um, and we've matured together. So is that a bad thing that we weren't necessarily the same now that we were then? But I think we can grow. So I don't know. See, now you got me questioning myself, Preston. I'm just going to say it. But I mean, we all grow, we all change, we all become closer, and things change, and your interests change. And sometimes the way you think about the other changes as well. And typically it's for the better, hopefully.
Interesting thought there, because I'm also thinking, well, Jesus, the bridegroom, is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Right, but we change, right?
Right, but at the same time, as we grow, his ability to interact with us also will grow. He's stayed the same, but he's able to, as we mature, able to bring us along in a different manner, if I can say it that way.
So, Sarah, I think you really are helping with the momentum of this discussion, which is in many ways a tougher one than folks perhaps would like to admit. But you did yourself and perhaps humankind a bit of a disservice when you said we're the same when we get together. Listen, I'm not talking about the same. I'm simply talking about all in, right? Because Sarah, I think you brilliantly described what happens when you start all in and as you then mature through the matriculation of life, is that you start at one place. By the way, the other brilliance was Steve weeks ago talking about his transformation, his transformative experience with the bride that allowed him to be more than typically he would be by himself. That all inness is what in many ways allowed Steve not only to get to the altar, but then to experience that transformation that Sarah has described. Now, we've been together for years, we've matured, and we're different, but at the same time, there's a lot of us that's better. Yes. That's what happens when the bride and groom are all in and they experience the transformation, but they also keep as a reminder the sense of covenant, which in a simple way is commitment. Commitment through when you don't like each other, when you can't stand looking at each other, when you would like the Acme company to drop a big, huge something or other on the spouse, or that is what allows the growth to happen when all in is sincere. And the transformation happens that leads to the growth and continued commitment and covenant between those individuals. So let me ask you that. So Gene earlier today talked about Tony McDonald, and looking into Tony McDonald and his life and Tony's experiences and saying, wow, that is neat. Wow, that's what that is. And I mentioned that we would revisit that sometimes we have experiences and it's easier for us when we see them versus when we experience them. By the way, this is why Hebrews 10 and 24 and 25 makes sense. This is why we need to meddle in each other's lives, because sometimes you can't see your own forest and trees because you're so surrounded by cliffs and by jagged edges. You sometimes, if not all the time, need somebody to come alongside you and to say, no, that's not the way it is. That's not the way it's supposed to look. So Let me make a statement and then allow you to comment. So we as a group have been exposed to, if not the expression all in, to the regular statement all in. Almost to the point where it's profanity for those of us that are listening and gathered today. All in. But can you really be all in if you, your groom, and your spouse are not in agreement? And we can look at that from an eternal standpoint, right? Which is the marriage supper of the Lamb. But we can also look at it from an earthly standpoint in terms of those of us who have engaged in wedding and being wedded, the same thing. Let me pause, comment, allow you to comment, questions, or points of peculiarity that we need to point out.
And two walk together except they be agreed.
Where's that from? What's that mean?
Some dude named Amos, I think, said something about that. We have to be, in order for us to be successful as a couple, we have to be on the same page, playing from the same playbook, headed the same direction.
So maybe we should look at this from the Jewish marriage perspective of there's an agreement, a contract between the two families, which could be Jesus's bridal gift, which is his death for us, and the Holy Spirit's sealing as a promise. Then there's the engagement period, which I guess we are in now as we try to perfect and learn to grow in him. And then there'll be the actual marriage and the marriage supper. So I just, the more I study, the more I realize how far I am from where I want to be.
Well stated, Di. I was thinking in that same way that if the marriage supper is when we're with him, then this is the betrothal period. And I think where I heard Preston talking is, are we excited about that? Is there an anticipation about that? Right. And I know I just kind of look at the Christmas account, right, with Mary and Joseph and that, and that anticipation that you sense in her. I'm going to be marrying this guy, and whether it was arranged in a true sense or not, she had bought into that. The all-in idea that Preston's talking about. It's like, well, maybe it's not the guy I would have picked, but now that I'm in it, I'm excited about it, and I really want to make it work. So yeah, I'm glad you brought those images in, because that was kind of the sense I was trying to get to is what's happening in this period to get us to that.
When we revisit what Sarah chatted about in terms of the earthly mirror, the earthly example of that, I had told you several weeks back to consider a song. I believe that Gene stated has been remade into a Christian tune, and I think it has. I haven't listened to it years. But it was originally a song in the late 60s by a group called the Spiral Staircase. And it's called More Today Than Yesterday. And the chorus says, I love you more today than yesterday, but not as much today as I will tomorrow. So if our sensibility about eternity is not one that has effervescence so that you want to tell people about what Diane just suggested, I'm going to an event, and you can go too. And we can all be experiencing this together. If you are in a lifetime where that can't be your mantra, you may need to look again at the transformative power of the Holy Spirit and ask, am I washed in that transformative power? But I would also suggest to you, and I'll make this point as the last one to linger with you this week, this also applies to our earthly partnering that are mirrors. And I mentioned earlier that it's real easy to point fingers. I didn't say point fingers, but when you see it, you think you know it. And we were exposed for quite some time to the phrase all in that involved an earthly mirror of the marriage agreement. But we were all very challenged to believe it in terms of all in. And we were challenged to believe that all in meant all in because we never saw the two people together. We very rarely saw the two people in agreement. We very rarely were able to get the bride and groom in a way where they were both equally yoked and committed to the phrase all in when it came not only to Jesus, but when it came to us. And it was very easy for us looking at that to go, I don't think all in means what you think all in means. And so I'm also asking us, before we begin and embark on this transformative study, to apply this to our lives and our spiritual lives for the going forward, whenever Jesus calls us to him, and for the now. If we are pretending and if we have ourselves appeased by saying we're all in, but all in doesn't lead to a sense of joy, doesn't lead to a sense of zeal, doesn't lead to a sense of, I need to tell you about. And when I say tell you about my husband, tell you about my wife, tell you about our life and what we're looking forward to, in addition to telling you about eternity, telling you about what Jesus did for me. If you struggle with those, your all in may not be all in. Pause your comment.
All in sometimes can be accurate, but it may be all into something different than what the other person is all into.
You mean in terms of bride and groom?
Basically, the scenario you're talking about that you were describing. Yes, the bride and groom of, and not spiritually speaking now, I'm just saying that the couple may be all in, but they may not be all into the thing that we're thinking that they should be or we would like for them to be. There may be different focus or foci or whatever the word is, plural, focuses. One may be all in for Jesus in one area, but where the other is all in for Jesus in another area.
Hey, Sarah, you heard that answer.
Yeah.
What's the response to what Gene just said?
With being all in, but not on the same thing.
Exactly. Sure. What's the answer to that?
You know, I think as people, we come at relationships with different agendas, right? And are all in when you first, okay. So if you're thinking about a dating relationship, right? All in is very different at the start because all in is about the lovey-dovey feelings and the way I feel, the way you feel, the way we feel together, right? So we're all in, but our feelings may be different. But as you mature and you go through life together, that's the lovely phrase of nowadays, you go through life together, those your all in becomes very different because now you guys are on the same page and you want what's best for each other. And feelings don't necessarily take as big a role as they used to because now, like Steve has said, and unfortunately he cannot talk without coughing his head off right now, that you know he wants what's best for me and I want what's best for him, but it's very different than before because what I want may not necessarily be the right thing, but he's looking out for me and he's looking out for our relationships together. So I think that all in can be different at the start, but as you grow and you develop that relationship, the all in changes, but you've got to be willing to take those steps in that relationship because sometimes people are like going, yeah, no, I'm done. See ya. Right? But um, it becomes different, but it becomes better as you grow. And I don't know if I'm saying that right. I don't know if I'm making it clear, but that's kind of where my brain is.
I just thought of something that might clear it up.
Oh,
In
good.
the
Thank you.
legal world, word marriage of convenience.
Ooh,
Are we all in? Or is it a marriage of convenience? As long as Jesus is doing what I want him to do for me, I'm all in. But I'm not willing to do any work that might change me. I'm pretty cool that I've accepted him as my Lord and Savior, and I'm good.
because it's that willingness, right? To, yeah, yeah, I think that that does help, Di. Thank you. It's like I'm trying to figure out how I want to say it.
Marriage counseling and therapy for adults to help them understand perhaps the traversing uh, courting, dating, and then the commitment of marriage, and then what it looks like as you mature. Because there's a lot of brilliance and a lot of, even though you've been kicked out several times today from the mainstream churches, there are many things that you said today that I had to write down that there was just so much uh, gravity in them. And to help, to give you an example of what you just described, Ellen yesterday wanted to go on a hike. In my house, to me, hike is profanity. In fact, I regularly say to her, I will not call it that. It has to be W-A-L-K, and that is still kind of borderline profanity. But she wanted to do that, walking along the dam and through the trails, and I absolutely loathe walking without a purpose. If you're just kind of walking, I hate it. And I've been with Bruce before where we've literally walked miles through the city from building to building. I can handle that because there's kind of a destination and I can look forward to, when I'm done, walking. But sometimes when you're just walking, who knows when you're done? You're done when the bears eat your corpse. And so Ellen wanted to go, and she said, "You want to go?" Now, the answer to that is no. I don't want to go, and don't use the H word. But the reality of the response was, yeah. And so we went out for two hours and so walking, and she said, you know, it'd be better if you would do this and you'd hold my hand and stop grumbling. And at first I heard it and I went, hope a boulder falls in her head. But then afterwards I recognized, you know what? She's absolutely right. And so then I started to grab the dog, hold her hand, and stuff that I went, I hate what I'm doing right now. Except because we've grown and matured together, and I need to look out for what she wants more than I want to look out for what pleases me, I'm in her camp. That's what Sarah was just talking about. And so I'm regularly in a position of doing things that if I came to the marriage at first going, I'm all in, I wouldn't have done 30 years ago. But now I have a different attitude. And I have such an attitude about it, I can brag about not only our relationship, but who she is. And then you need to experience this. I can say to folks, wedding is marriage works. Because there's a change, there's a transformation, there's an undeservedness in here that sometimes it's easy to blow off because we've been together for so long. But when I recognize that, I need to go, okay, shut up, stop grumbling, hold her hand, and have a good time, and not a fake good time. So let me pause, give you some final comments and feedback. Sometimes that's what all in looks like from an earthly position, but it's got to have a mirror to the eternal position, which means sometimes what's in my head is all in is not all in. And there's a joy, there's a peace, there's a leisurely quality when I take my agenda and I mostly stuff it where it needs to be, which is outside of where the sun shines. And I put our agenda before my own. And that's from a worship standpoint here, and I believe it's from an eternal standpoint. And if we've not engaged in that kind of transformative understanding, then we may be challenged to know if we've experienced transformation through the Holy Spirit. So please think on this. We may be ready to walk through the transformation door. The questions I will leave you with this week are these two. Are you a happy person? Are you a joyous or joyful person? Happy person? Are you a joyful or joyous person? That's going to be how we open up next week. So please be thinking about that. Be thinking about your answer personally. Don't tell me what a movie told you. Tell me what you think about yourself in terms of happy or joyful joyousness.